This week's Four Questions Journalist Spotlight is brought to you by Leff's Atlanta Media, Atlanta's best journalist database. Subscribe at leffsatlantamedia.com.
Welcome to the next edition of our Four Questions Journalist Spotlight. We are talking with Leroy Chapman, who is the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Journal and Constitution. Or is it just the Atlanta Constitution? I'm just old school. Atlanta Journal.
The Journal Constitution is probably it. So we typically don't have an and there, but it's all right.
All right. Yeah, you can tell how long someone's been around town by whether they say, oh, I used to get the Journal in the afternoon all the time, and that kind of conversation. Well, let's start with, tell us a little bit about kind of what brought you to the AJC, and I know you've been there 13 years now, and about a year and a half as editor-in-chief. So, but what's been your path from a journalism standpoint to get to where you are now?
So I got here from South Carolina. So I've been a journalist in my home state of South Carolina. I'm a graduate of the University of South Carolina, and I actually did not graduate from the J school. I was an English major and I minored in journalism, but I did not major in journalism. But I was fortunate enough to be able to, right out of college, get a job at a small newspaper, and then I worked my way from there to working at the two of the three largest newspapers in South Carolina, which are the state newspaper in Columbia, which was the largest at the time, and the Greenville News, which was third, and the Charleston Post and Courier was probably in the middle. So I got to work for both of those newspapers, and Greenville is my hometown. So I got to do that for 6 years, which was great. But I got a call back in 2010 about an opportunity here. As it happened, one of my I was a politics editor, and one of my key people was a guy, his name's Aaron Shinen. And Aaron is a Georgian, but he was working with us and got recruited by the AJC. So the call to home for him was strong, and he went home. And shortly after he got there, he told me that they had room for more. So I got a call and decided to take a chance after a while. And it's funny because when they interviewed me for the opening that Aaron alerted me to, an internal candidate wound up getting it. But then they said, we really liked your interview, and we are always in the market for potential leaders. And so they hired me to a position and told me, get your foot in the door, and then we'll figure it out from there. And that's exactly what happened. So I got my foot in the door. And what has happened is I was able to kind of climb the room. And now you're
the man on top. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So there was no plan then. I think the plan was that I would actually have a chance to go from having no team to one team. I think that was the plan from the beginning. No one hired me in 2010 to take this job. No.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it works sometimes. But I feel like you've kind of put your imprint on the paper the last year and a half, and we've been following a lot of interesting changes that have been announced, and some that are in progress. So maybe give us a little feel for some of the new things that we're seeing at the AJC, and some of the things that we're going to see. And I've got some notes too. So if you forget something, I may ask a question or two.
Sure. So we've been able to rethink what we're doing to take what has been, of course, an institution that's been around for a long, long time. So as I got here and this particular job, we charted back 155 years for a publication that this organization has got as its history. So we're standing on all of that history. We're standing on all of that coverage. And we are charting a course for what's next. And so we understand that there's a lot of opportunity for us digitally. One of the things that we're in the midst of right now is important because it's politics. And so one of the big investments we made was in politics. And so you think about where we are now versus where we were a year ago or 5 years ago. We have more reporters. We have a daily radio show, which we kind of didn't see that one coming. But
well, you're talking about Bill Nighat's show.
Yes, we basically had an opportunity to hire Bill and take some of his audience and certainly take Bill and his expertise and build a new sort of show around it. So it starred Bill at one point. Now it is a panel that we say it's the best political team in Georgia, and I don't think there's a whole lot of dispute myself. So call me biased, but
no,
you call me biased, but
it's a great team. I work with those folks a lot, and let's give them a call out. Who's on that team?
So that would be our columnist, who is Patricia Murphy. We have Greg Bluestein, who is our lead political reporter, chief political reporter, who I think is also, people know him because he's a MSNBC or NBC contributor as well. So Greg has a lot of visibility, not only here in Georgia, but nationally. Tia Mitchell, who is our DC correspondent, who also has some profile too that goes beyond Georgia. So we're talking about some really well-respected people. And then, Bill, who kind of rounds out the four of that particular team. And we've got a roster of other reporters behind them too, along with them, I should not say behind them. That is wrong. Alongside with them, who are covering a lot of issues that are important too. So who are in Georgia State House, Mark Nisi, who's covering voting. And if you look at where we are right now in covering the politics and having the candidates for office here, we're able to cover it in Georgia, but we are also able to go beyond just Georgia when we need to. And there's no more important issue than voting. And we've got a reporter who is the expert on everything that's happening in terms of voting in Georgia, and who has his arms completely around all the questions that are being raised about what could happen Election Day.
Yeah, Marcus, great. He's been covering that for a long time. And, Greg, we worked with him. He was at AP. So he's a great source, great expert on these issues. He's become quite a encyclopedia. Yeah, we sometimes at the press club debates, we try to play stump Bluestein, and we usually can't stump him on a political question. He's on top of it.
He is an encyclopedia.
Well, it's interesting. How have you dealt with kind of, I don't want to say the trust issue, but the issue of people of trying to get people to understand to offer balanced coverage, to appeal to both sides of the political spectrum. How have you addressed that?
So we address it with depth. I mean, I think that there is the one thing that will win the day is when we come in and we are writing with some depth, with some authority on the issues that are important. I think a lot of when people are trying to understand whether or not media is leaning one way or another, I know that that's always something that we are aware of. But, typically it's in style and it's in things like that are, just a little bit less than what I think it should be the main thing, which is being able to, provide people with depth and insight and to be able to write with the kind of authority and contextual, I think mastery of a topic that, again, it's not really about a partisan lens, but it's really about, educating the electorate in a way that I think we're uniquely qualified to do. And so an example of that is that, as we talk about, policy, as we talk about strategy, as we talk about, how the parties communicate, as we talk about technology and what that means for voters and how they are, being approached and how they're consuming the stuff. I mean, those are things that we can write about with the kind of authority that I think really doesn't, it's not by nature gets you into partisanship. I think some of the smaller stake things sort of will get you there too. So anyway, I guess the short answer, I guess the now no longer short answer is that I think that depth, I think our own investment in really understanding deeply not only the mechanics of what it means to win an election in Georgia, but an understanding of the issues and the people that when we ground our journalism in those things, it's less about the partisanship of what's going on in social media when people are doing nothing but pointing fingers at one another.
All right. So one of my listeners, Crystal Bowie, I was talking to her earlier, and I said, Crystal, what do you have a question for Leroy Chapman? And she said, are you going to get a one-on-one with Kamala Harris before the election?
I would love that, but if the strategy that we see right now that's been deployed, she may not, journalists may not get much of any exposure now, given how late it is in the game. And I know that, and this is not just Harris. I mean, with any candidate, it's going to be pretty selective in terms of, how they expose a candidate to an interview. That said, we have a standing offer, and we've had that for a long time. We've had that for months and months and months. She was when President Biden was still running, she was, of course, his, she's on the ticket. And so she was in Atlanta a lot, and she was in Georgia a lot. And so we've tried to get her in, and we will continue to do that. But it looks like the strategy might not help us at all.
Well, I'll send her a link to this podcast when we're done, and we'll see if that gets her people off the dime, as they say. All right. So I know you guys have opened up some new bureaus around the state in Savannah and Macon and Athens. I think there was some conversation at some point about adding Columbus and Augusta. Is that still kind of in the plan to add small bureaus in those markets too?
Yeah, we're still looking at what makes the most sense. I think that the strategy itself, we've seen some good early returns from where we are. To say that's still, worth considering, and we just got to figure out the when and the how.
Yeah.
So right now we are in Athens, and we're in Savannah, and we're in Macon.
Right.
And we are seeing some audience growth in those places. And so we know, though, that they're distinct. I mean, there is a distinct audience in Athens, of course. What folks in Athens care about, by us being there, we're getting a better sense of it. But it made sense just on paper to go to those places. Now we've got to build out, where are the opportunities for audience, and what can we solve for people? What is it that they need? As we think about the media diets in those places, they're different because of the existence of each of the local media market in each place, which has differences there. So there's some learnings, and I think that we will apply those learnings to how we conduct the next phase of this.
Yeah, Adam in Savannah, I worked with when he was officially on the Savannah paper, so he's definitely a guy who knows that market. So I think that was a great ad for you guys to put him into the mix there. Yep. One of the things that I've been kind of following is kind of the conversation about maybe some changes that you guys are going to make about how maybe certain beats are covered, kind of more issue focused, more geography focused. Can you walk us through how is that going to change, and kind of how is that going to be different, or is it going to be different?
There may be, though. We want it to be different. So yes, but what does it do? The question is it less? No, it'll be different, and maybe a little less. So here's what that means, and maybe I can give you an example of it. It's not that we won't be covering local institutions, but I think that the way we traditionally did that was bound in, I think, some obligations that we've had before when it came down to, and I've been in this business a long time, as you have. Let's take just Cobb County, for example. It made sense to have a Cobb County reporter that's doing nothing but, sitting in those meetings, understanding who's elected, and telling that story all the time. Waking up in the morning and every single day, probably writing something about what's going on with Cobb County government. And what that got you was, I think, part of the obligation for when newspapers were like the only connection with government. And, if it worked for us, probably you wouldn't have any visibility to what's going on in government. And of course, that's no longer the case. I mean, governments can speak directly to citizens, which is fine. And is our place to remake that, or is it our place to tell people, what to think of this, what it all means to write about impact, and also to maybe narrow it from the moment to moment of, for example, I'll give you a real example. We've got what happened over in Cobb County with their election maps. So I think that there's probably an instinct traditionally to write about that story and to write about that argument that has been going on, probably moment to moment and breathlessly talking about all the parties and what it means with
Right.
them, right?
Right.
So we can write about the process all along, and we can get that. But what we really should focus on, though, are outcomes. And I think one of the things that with this approach we free ourselves from is sometimes writing very narrowly about process and not writing with enough depth about the issues that will have the greatest impact on people, which is what we want to do, and also explaining those things. Because in that scenario, if you take that reporter, uh, there's a lot of things that as journalists we say, that's a great investment of our time. But one of the things in the digital environment that we can get is that we have a better sense too of how engaged an audience might be in that, or citizens might be in Cobb County, into something that journalists and also the people who are there may care a whole lot about versus what people really care about. So what we're doing is we're shifting to be able to do a couple of things. Topically, we want to focus on the things that has the most impact on people and how they live. And we also want to be very solutions oriented. So in that scenario I gave you, that I think that I would have been an editor 10 years ago who would have said that we've got to just stay on this because, wow, what this is a moment where Cobb's leadership is in crisis based upon this, and we would cover it breathlessly. Well, what you give up, though, is that there are other stories in Cobb that have to do with the way people live that they're far more interested in, that has more impact, and that what we do is we'll free ourselves to be more aligned with the solutions that isn't just palace intrigue and this other sort of thing that sometimes when we're talking about local politics, especially, you can sort of get pinned into.
Okay.
So that's what we want. We want what people are, we want to meet people where they are, and we want to make sure that we are providing solutions.
Okay. Yeah, and I think I'm kind of looking forward to kind of seeing how that shakes out. That I think that's going to be interesting. And I'm a firm believer in that, newspapers and media need to every couple of years take a look at themselves, and if they need to reinvent, then they'll reinvent. Because as you said, what's important to audiences is going to change over time, and sometimes we circle back to something we did 20 years ago, and sometimes we do something different, right? I get people all the time who say, it'd be cool if the AJC had like a special section on like technology, where they focus on technology. I said, back in the early 90s, they had that, and I worked with those guys all the time. All right, so this next section is kind of the fun section. So, and this is a little bit of a lightning round, so you don't have to do long answers. So, give me something kind of fun and cool about Leroy that people might not know about, and that could be a hobby or things you collect or a certain talent. Anything like that.
I don't necessarily have a talent, but I tell people this, that one of the things I did when I was in college is that I was an amateur barber. So here's what I did, and I did this during my Navy days too. So I learned how to be a barber, and I have a couple of barbers in the family, and so the tools were available to me. I got them when I was a kid and started to experiment.
That's awesome.
So that was my hustle. So I was cleaning guys up, and it was great. So yeah, amateur barber is probably not something that people would know about.
All right. Favorite local restaurant?
Oh wow, this one would get you in trouble.
with your family or with your dining editor?
Yeah. So right. So look, Figueres is our.
I can never ask her that question.
Yeah. So I have many. So how about this?
I'll let you pick two. How about that?
Okay. So let me say, if it were, how about this? If I were looking for say if I want a pizza, one of my favorite pizza places is still Fellini's. I know that probably is. I mean, it's an Atlanta thing, and so I love Fellini's. So if I were looking to not spend a lot of money, yeah, I might go to Fellini's. I have a good experience there. If it were my birthday and somebody's looking to spend, maybe a little more money, I don't know. There are a couple of steakhouses that I would go to.
All right.
Bones.
I'm gonna
Bones
go
is a good
to
one. Bones is a good one. So I would say Bones.
okay. But that's a good choice. All right. Favorite local getaway. What's a local place you like to go to get away from noise and chatter and work a little bit?
So if you say local, I mean Georgia.
Let's say Georgia.
Yeah, Georgia. I like both the coast and the mountains. So,
All right.
so I like both the coast and the mountains. So I think I've probably had equally amount of fun just going down to the coast as I've had, going up to North Georgia and getting a cabin and hanging out for a few days. So I like them both.
Okay. Let's see. Favorite non-work hobby. How about that?
Wow. So, it's becoming cooking.
Okay.
Increasingly. So,
All right.
which is funny because, cooking was probably more of a chore when my kids were young and my wife and I used to just have to split that duty. Now that the kids are adults, it's more like, all right, let's experiment and do some stuff.
All right. Favorite guilty pleasure. What's the guilty thing that no one knows about?
Wow. Let's see. Guilty pleasure. Sometimes it might be some rather lowbrow television. I shouldn't say low,
Right.
but maybe just some television that's just like I was watching once the Power, the Power universe that 50 Cent does, which again, don't get angry, but it's not great TV, but it's soapy. It's soapy, and I kind of got and started on that. So I do like some mindless television. So I would just say that.
Sometimes you don't want to have to dig too deep into it. You just want something fun, funny, and that just kind of keeps your attention a little bit. All right, and that in reruns. Yeah,
that in some. I love some.
Right.
My wife and I, we do it. Everybody Loves Raymond or something like that.
Yeah, that's first couple of seasons. Then they got a little mean in the end. All right, so last book you've read.
So I read his name is George Floyd book. That's Toluse and Robert up at Washington Post. They wrote that book, and I kind of started it, and I am actually not quite finished because I handed it off. But it is a marvelous book, and I recommend it because they were here in Atlanta a few months ago, talked about it. And they said that they started to write this book about George Floyd, and they wound up writing a book about America. And it was about America, race, and the systems that created George Floyd.
Excellent.
Yep.
We have been talking with Leroy Chapman, editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Journal and Constitution, or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, or the Atlanta Constitution. Yeah, AJC. The AJC. Let's just
we'll answer to them all. How about that?
There you go. As long as you click on ajc.com, you're going to get where you're going. Leroy, thank you so much for being with us. You can, as always, folks, you can find our archive of Journalist Spotlights on YouTube or on your favorite audio podcast. And join us in 2 weeks, and we will have another great guest. And as always, check out our Leff Atlanta Media database if you're looking for local sources, media, and our Mitch's Media Musings newsletter every month for the latest in Atlanta's journalism community. Leroy, thank you. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks. Sure. All right. Goodbye.